The second example that I'm going to use today focuses both on the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes in King David's life. I'm going to read all of 2 Samuel 11 and talk about the story of David and Bathsheba. In the spring, at the time when the kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, "I am pregnant." So David sent this word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants, and did not go down to his home. When David was told Uriah did not go home, he asked him, "Haven't you just come from a long distance? Why didn't you go home?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my master Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open fields. How can I go to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." Then David said to him, "Stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, "Put Uriah in the front line where the fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him, so he will be struck down and die." So while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. Joab sent David a full account of the battle. He instructed the messenger, "When you have finished giving the king this account of the battle, the king's anger may flare up, and he may ask you, 'Why did you get so close to the city to fight? Didn't you know they would shoot arrows from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, son of Jerubbesheth? Didn't a woman throw an upper millstone on him from the wall, so that he died in Thebez? Why did you get so close to the wall?' If he asks you this, then say to him, 'Also, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead.'" The messenger set out, and when he arrived, he told David everything Joab had sent him to say. The messenger said to David, "The men overpowered us and came out against us in the open, but we drove them back to the entrance of the city gate. Then the archers shot arrows at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's men died. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead." David told the messenger, "Say this to Joab. Don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it. Say this to encourage Joab." When Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. This is a story that most of us have probably heard in our lives, and is a prime example of a godly person falling into the trap of physical temptation and sinning hugely because of it. In this example, David sees Bathsheba when she is bathing and notices that she is beautiful. This is his first strike of temptation in this occurrence, as he states to himself that this woman is beautiful, and now wants to get to know her or have her. This is a prime example of David's human nature and the lust of the eyes, as he saw Bathsheba bathing and wanted her. Then, after he figures out who the husband is, he starts his true path of temptation, starting with his second strike, which is strategically planning a ploy for Uriah's death and cover-up of his sin. After David has the lust of the eyes, he has the physical desire to meet up with her, and falls into the rut of the lust of his human flesh, and ends up committing sexual immorality. David struggles and fails to two of the three major points in 1 John 2, 15 through 17, falling for the lust of the eyes after he sees Bathsheba bathing and wants to marry her, and the lust of the flesh for the physical urge to commit sexual immorality. After trying to convince Uriah to go back to his home, and failing, he ends up just sending Uriah to the battlefield to die, to make it seem like he was sadly lost in the battle. David did this to try to cover up his sin, and so he could take Bathsheba as his wife. His third strike comes from Uriah carrying his own death note into battle, and then dying, and David taking Bathsheba to be his queen after sending her husband to death on the battlefield. This is the true sin that pushed David over the edge, and that gets David in trouble in this situation, as he kills off Bathsheba's husband just because his eyes see her beauty and his flesh wants her as his own. Lust is one of the forms of temptation that some people may consider less of a struggle today than it was in those times, but it is truly just because it is never really talked about in life today, besides the extreme examples. And the best example of lust in today's world, with flesh and sexual immorality, is pornography. It's a temptation that a lot of people struggle with in the world today. Sadly, 10% of adults today in the US admit to having addictions to pornography or visiting other sites related to it. But this is not just a worldly struggle in the world today. It is also a struggle with people inside the church, mostly young men. According to Mission Frontiers, 68% of church-going men watch pornography at least once a month, which is sadly a very high percentage of church-going people. The percentage sadly rises to 76% when just talking about 18 to 24-year-olds, which is more than 3/4 of the young men in a church struggling with a pornography addiction. Pornography is probably the largest physical temptation in the world today that any one person is going to struggle with sometime in their life. It's as bad as drugs and alcohol in people's lives, and turns into an addiction that may take away from how people feel and how they act in their daily lives. Satan has learned to use temptation as a trick in our lives, with something that starts small, but then grows more and more and more as we do it, and struggle with it, to turn it into a large temptation and an addiction issue. A great verse on this issue is stated in Proverbs 7:25 through 26, where Solomon is talking about adultery and adulteresses, and states, "Let not your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her oaths. For many a victim has she laid low, and all her slain are a mighty throng." These verses make a great point on how temptation... These verses make a great point on temptation, on how if you turn your heart aside to a sin once in your life, then you'll get laid low and possibly struggle with this temptation for the rest of your life. And it happens when you do this action once, and that will make it so you'll struggle for so long, unless you ask God to help them with this struggle